Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulullah amma ba'd. Once again, brothers and sisters in Islam and brothers and sisters in humanity, I want to continue where we left off in the last program we did, based on the knowledge of self. It's important. Its importance cannot be overstated, because without the knowledge of self, we cannot go forward in this world. And to move forward, we have to go back historically to look at the human creation and how it evolved over the years. What happened? What changes took place? How was it changed? Who changed it? So if we go from the past, we address the present and prepare for the future. We understand as Muslims that Almighty Allah created Adam and Eve, put them on earth as men and wives, and one of the objectives of this creation as man and wife was for the lawful reproduction of the human race. And they made sure that they fulfilled those objectives. And over the years, nations and tribes evolved. And they were all worshippers of their Creator. They were Muslims. Among them was scholars, people of knowledge, who they could go to for advice to benefit themselves religiously and from a social point of view. However, after some years and the scholars died, the people became ignorant. They didn't know how to proceed. We understand it was that point that Shaitan came to them and said to them, simple, make images of your scholars, put them up in your homes, and through them you worship your Creator. Ask Him for what you want. And this was the first introduction of shirk among the nations of the world. This continued for many years until Almighty Allah sent the Prophet Nuh to call them back to Tawheed, to the worship of one God. We understand he called them for over 800 years. Some say 800, some say 950 years. They disobeyed. Because we understand that the greatest sin that the human race commit is shirk, associating partners in worship to the Creator, or worship other than the Creator, or worship any aspect of the creation. So, after the long years of calling them back to worship one God, and they rejected it, Almighty God sent the flood, which we all know as human beings, and mankind was destroyed, except for those who Almighty God chose to save in the ark, as we understand it. Coming forward, millions of people has born, and creation is divided into nation and tribe and spread across the world, and the world expand according to the development of the human race and the knowledge that they have how to expand and how to take over different parts of the world. And we have the world divided into Africa and United States and Britain and different portions of the world as we know it today. Through that period of time, many prophets has came. We understand 24,000 prophets and messengers has come to mankind to guide them back to the worship of one God. Some accept them, some reject them. And finally, the last prophet came, Muhammad, alayhi salatu. It is to be understood that all the prophets came with one religion, calling people to worship one God, and they were all Muslims. So Muslim is not something strange as the social media and the enemies of Islam will try to proclaim. How were the human race adjust? How were they created? How were they divided? He created the male and the female. The Almighty God say, Wamin and ayati and karakam and fusakam aswaja, linas kunu ile wajanakum, wanakum, parapa. Almighty Allah says, He created the male and the female, and from there we take our wives, that we may find repose in them. And He has put mawadatan barakma, love and mercy, between our hearts, between us, that we may be merciful to each other and treat each other with dignity as men and wives. So from them we have wives, mothers, daughters, sisters among the women. From the male we have fathers, brothers, sons, fathers, brothers, sons. And what's the fourth one? I leave that for my audience to judge. Today we have moved away from that now, because we have in some houses two fathers, because the equation of how the relationship between human beings has developed has changed. So we have men mind men, women mind women, and that's something that everyone will account for their own behavior, not just in this life, but for the world to come. Going forward, we have to understand where we stand today. The development of immorality universally. We have punishment that has come to mankind. AIDS, Ebola, COVID-19, climate change, volcanoes, war, population divided between themselves, refugees, haraj, as the Prophet described, haraj, killing between each other. Never in the history of the human race since the time of Noah has the world been united upon one common phenomenon, which is COVID-19. Is this something that is good for the human race? Why has this happened? The Messenger of Allah has spoken over 1400 years ago that when humans become involved in immorality, men and women having relationship in public, and other than these, to name just one immorality is sufficient, and we know the rest, because time doesn't allow me to go into details, but we know what's going on in the world today. Then disaster is bound to happen. How do we get out of this? How do we go forward? How do we come away? How do we come away from what is going on and to make the changes in our lives? There's no point blaming social media, blaming the government. In the schools today, what is being taught? On the streets, what is being taught? Is it something that benefits the human race? Is it something that benefits our families? When are we going to take responsibility for our own action and stop blaming each other and blaming the government? Let the government do what they have to do. They will account for their behavior universally, and we will account for our behavior and our obligation to our children. As I said last week, on the last program, we have an obligation to educate our children with beneficial knowledge, to sow the seed of righteousness among them, honesty, respect, obedience to their Creator and their parents, obedience to the rule of law, to the elders, to the authorities, to the teachers, to distinguish between what is wrong and what is right. As we say in Islam, maruf and munkar. This is our obligation as children, as parents. What is the purpose of life? Is it just to reprocreate, to eat, to have a good time, without thinking about the final consequences of our life, which is death and the accountability that goes on after death? If we do not seriously, and I mean seriously, begin to prepare the children, this millennium generation, for the future, what's going to happen to them with what is prevalent at the moment and the direction in which the world is going? Brothers and sisters of all race, of all kind, of all nation, of all generation, it's time to wake up. The evidence is clear. Wake up to what is happening. Like I said, if we don't wake up to what is happening, let's give some examples. We have over 200 leaders of the world today in Scotland discussing how they can put an end to what they call global warming. What has brought this about? It's our own action that has contributed to the situation of the world today. And that's only one of the multitude of phenomena that we have created, and now we are reaching the consequence. You think these people, this government, who is discussing it, they can't even agree between themselves what are the solutions? Because the solution is not in their hands. It is not them who cause drought or flood. They would like to make you believe this. It's not them who cause world fire to be burning or haraj, killing. They may contribute to this, but can they stop it? Time will tell. We as a people has to recognize our contribution to the disasters of the world and begin to make that quantum change. We have to begin to educate ourselves and our children. What is the purpose of life and the reason for living? Education. To quote one of our brothers, education is a passport to the future, is a passport to tomorrow. But the future belongs to those who strive for it. So, my question to my audience, if one of our children should come to us and ask, Mom or Dad, what is the purpose of life and the reason for living? Every human being in the world should have one single answer based upon facts, not opinions or presumption. What would we tell them? How many of us could honestly answer this question truthfully? What is the purpose of life and the reason for existence? We have to get back to the beginning. That's where it started from. A man makes a car. He dictates how the car should be used or what's the purpose of it. Can any human being, past, present, or future, any scientist, any doctor, any professors, can they tell us what is the purpose of life and the reason for living? I challenge the world to answer this question. What is the purpose of life and the reason for living? So therefore, my brothers and sisters of the world, we have to stop playing games and talking about feeling good and go back to the origin of our creation and the purpose of our creation and the reason for our living and the accountability that come with the consequences of our action both in this life and how we account for this in the akhirah, in the world to come. I I'm concerned to the extent of being worried about what is going on in the world today. And I want to advise the world, not as a scientist, but as a believer and one person who have looked at the purpose of our creation. And for this reason, I've put a book together, which should be released very soon. The Purpose of Life and the Reason for Living. And I want all my people, human beings, to read this book and to reflect on the consequence of our action. And hopefully, this may lead us to make the changes in life that is beneficial, to begin to teach beneficial knowledge. You know, the Arabic language is so beautiful. It describes knowledge as ilm al-nafiya, beneficial knowledge. Because without knowledge that benefits the human race, it's bound to be misguidance, because it leads nowhere. But beneficial knowledge will benefit the world both in this life and the life to come.